All right, guys, I wanted to mention really quick another thing that we talked about last week was how to make some more interesting shapes. And so we had our core primitives, and one thing that we could do with some of our shapes is, I'm going to go ahead and use this wheel set right here, is that we can extrude them, okay? And we can also do booleans on them to create some other interesting shapes. And let me use this as an example. I was going to do this a little bit later on, but I could do it right now. What I like to do is I like to model something first and get an idea of what it looks like. The one thing that sucks about this right now is it's really basic shapes and there's really not any detail in there. So if I wanted to add detail, let's take a look at some things that I can do here. Watch, I'm going to completely ungroup everything. I could take this right here, okay, and I could duplicate that, move it over a little bit, scale it down, and make it a little bit smaller. Watch. If I move that out, stick it in there just a little bit like that, touch the object I want to keep, the object that's going to affect it, and I come over here and I go to Edit Mesh, okay, Mesh, Booleans, and Difference, which, by the way, just to let you know, in the new version of Maya that just came out in 2015, they put all the tools under Edit Mesh and Mesh together, so you don't always get confused while you're looking for them. We'll have that after the winter break. If I go to Difference, see what it just did? It put that little inner line of detail right there, that little cutout. All right, those little details can be of a huge benefit for me. Okay, that was doing a boolean. Okay, again, to do that, I have two different shapes. Let's say I wanted to make it go a little bit deeper. I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it in just a little bit more like that. And then I'm going to take that, touch the shape I want to keep, the shape that's going to affect it, Mesh, Boolean, and then I go to Difference. Okay, and look at what it did. Okay, now with anything, it always moves the pivot back. So I have to come back over here and go Modify Center Pivot. Actually, you'll soon discover, I'll show you guys probably later this week or next week how to make hotkeys of your own. So you can just hit C and then it centers the pivot every time. And you don't have to go back up to the menu bar all the time. That's a great thing about this program. You can make hotkeys for the things that you're doing. So now that wheel looks a lot more interesting to me because it has a little groove inside it, right? So let's take a look at this little leg that I have right here. Okay, let's talk about extrusion. I don't know if I showed you this or not, how to extrude an object. Extrusion is when we take a surface and we can either pull it out or push it back in. So watch what I'm going to do right here. And then come down, I'm going to go to face. Have to be in face mode. I'm going to touch that front face right there. Do you see how I have that touched? Then I'm going to come back over here under Mesh and go to Extrude. And then these arrows pop up. Remember I extruded on the sphere in the last class and made those funky faces that came out of it? Okay. Now I can, what I can do is I have the move and the scale tool. So now, watch. If I scale that face in a little bit like that, scale it a little bit in this way, and then look, then I could pull it upward like that. Now I created a nice little ledge on top of that chair. Do you see that? Okay. Here, let me do that to this end right here. I can touch that little tip right there. Let's go back down here. I'm going to do the same thing. Edit Mesh. I'm going to come down to Extrude. I'm going to scale in first a little bit this way. I'm going to scale in that side like so. And then I'm going to grab the end of it and I'm going to pull it out with the arrow. See that? And look. Now I created some little detail on my chair. Now look at that. That looks a lot cooler having that little boolean there and that little detail end than it does looking at that, doesn't it? I was going to save that for the very end because after I make my base shapes, I come back in and I add a little bit of detail and make my objects look more realistic, okay? But now let's do, what happens if we do the extrusion on the other end? So watch this. This is really cool. Watch, I can take this, go back to face mode. I'm going to select this face right here. There, it's selected. Watch, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go to Edit Mesh and go to Extrude. This one's a little touchy because it's a different shape, but if I use the scale button right here, there, see how I did that? I got that pretty accurate. Now, here's the best part, is I'm going to hit Extrude again really quick. Edit Mesh, and then I'm going to go down to, Edit Mesh, there it is, Extrude. And now, look, I just pushed it inside itself like that. You see that? So now I created a little indent like it's a piece of molded plastic. However, though, that's not on the opposite side, is it? But this is what's really cool about Maya, is I could do two sides at once. So watch, we're going to get Control Z. I'm going to go back to the beginning when it was just selected. I'm going to select that face. I'm going to select this face. You can look at it in see-through mode. I have two faces selected. Okay? I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to go down to Extrude. I'm going to extrude this up a little bit. Use that scale arrow, move it in like so. And look at what it did to the other side. It's doing it at the same time. Okay? And then I'm going to hit Extrude again. And then I'm going to move that face in just a little bit. See that? But look at what it's doing on the other side. It's doing the same thing for me. Okay? And if I move it too much, they overlap each other. See that overlap real quick? I can move it outward if I wanted to. Pretty cool, huh? Or I can move it back in a little bit like that. I like it like that because now if I click off of my object and look at it, see how it looks like a piece of molded plastic? Because it has detail on it now. It has a little end that drops down inside. It has this little part that pops up out here. Now you'll notice here, see how this pops up a little bit more and that doesn't quite pop up as much? I could still adjust it, right? I could grab the vertices or the face of that object. I'm still in face mode, so I could touch that face right there, go back to the move button, and I can move that face up a little bit more if I want, like that. Okay? So what's cool about that is now I look, now look at that chair wheel. That chair wheel doesn't have that indentation on it, right? So maybe I delete that, take the one that does, duplicate it, bring it over here. I showed you how you can use scale or rotate, right? This time I'll use rotate. I'm going to spin that exactly 180 degrees. Come over here, type in 180. Okay. Make sure it's centered where it's not crossing that middle part. Like that. And there it is. So now when I select this and I'm going to group this. Okay. Here, that's my little bolt, right? Group, center pivot. That's the wheel, group, center pivot, and now I have this base here. I'm going to group them all together, center the pivot. I'm doing it with a hotkey, but you'd go up under Modify Center Pivot. Okay, but look at the difference. Look at my chair wheel now. That chair arm looks a whole lot better than that one, doesn't it? That's just plain. Nothing wrong with plain, though. You're just starting. But extrusion is a way that you can create extra shapes. Okay, it's a way you can modify a shape. So you got to use it at your own discretion to think about how you would benefit something. So what's cool is now I have this. So what that means is I can come back over here. Do I need these anymore? No. Those are my old models. I can delete those, come back over, move this into position right here, and then I could duplicate that guy, go to inverse, put this on -1. Okay. And now, once I get that into position the way that I want it, now I can duplicate those two, group, center the pivot, duplicate, and then I can rotate those guys like so, -90. And look at the difference. See how much cooler my chair looks now? I have a lot more detail in it. Okay? But don't worry about the detail right now. The best thing to do is to make it out of core primitives, because what happens is a lot of you guys in here are art majors is you get carried away in the detail and you do all this detail and it becomes real heavy and then you forget about the whole part of the chair. Detail can always be done at the end, but I want to show you that there's a difference there. I deleted the other chair legs and now I have a really cool looking chair leg. Even on here, let's say I want to put more detail. I could come over here, go to face, select all these faces right here, get all these, and I can go to Extrude, Edit Mesh, Extrude. I can scale it down in. I can even scale from the center. That's not really looking too cool, but let's go back and Command Z. Maybe I'm going to get it to about there. And then I'm going to extrude again. edit mesh, extrude. And then this time I can, look, I can bring it outward. And I could scale them down a little like this. So see how I made that little bit of detail right there? I did that with extrusion. So that's pretty cool. Now, what happens sometimes is it gives me these little jagged edges here. So let me show you when I click off. See that? It does that on cylinders sometimes. If it does that, I might Command Z and not do the extrusion and do something else. Because it only does that on cylinders, and what it does is, see those little rough edges on there? It doesn't look smooth. And I have these jagged lines, and it always does that on cylinder-shaped objects or spheres. Okay? And it doesn't keep it soft. So because of that, I might come in here and do this right now. And Command Z it and take it back to normal to where it was nice and smooth. And then I might come back in later and do something else in terms of detail. Okay. All right, let's check that. What about this detail? What if I selected every other face? Let's try this. What if I selected that face? I don't know if I have the right numbers to select every other face. Let's see. So here's another way we can put in some little cool detail. Every other face. Let's see if we have it. Yeah, I do have every other face now selected, right? So watch. I'm going to use my hotkey. I'm going to go to extrude. That's going to do one for me. That's the one it's doing, and it's replicating it across all the other faces, right? And then I could, let's say I push it in a little bit, then I hit extrude again, and then pull it in, and then touch the ground plane, get off of that. See the detail I just created on there? I created something different, okay? By extruding. If you want that. I mean, that's okay. It's not bad, but it's, you know, I could do better. But it's just little details with things. That might be a chair base, but I need to ask myself this. I'm going to Command Z and undo it. Am I even going to see that much detail right here? Because what's going to be right above me? The base of the chair. So I'm not even going to see anything under there, so why waste my time? However, though, on the chair wheels, I'm going to see I'm going to see that information out in the open, and that's going to look pretty cool. Okay, that'll be good. So go ahead and model for the rest of the class. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start to render it so I can get it uploaded. Okay, did you have a question, Christine? Okay, I'll be right there to fix it. Okay, let me stop the recorder real quick. And then we'll continue on with the rest of the demo. Okay, guys, welcome back. Introduction to Maya here. Let's do a little bit of a review about what we have here. Okay, so when we first open up our program, this is what we should see. Okay, we have our menu bar up on the top. Please make sure that you're in. Other students use these computers, so someone might be in here doing some advanced stuff. Make sure that you're not in surfaces or animation. It changes part of the window here. So come over here and you can select this right now and go down to polygons. So really quick, this happens sometimes where people lose their UI elements. You're working and you hit part of the screen, and this is what people get sometimes. Okay? They're like, oh my gosh, what happened? My primitives are gone. My screen, this isn't working. My channel box is gone. I have one open view and I don't see anything. Okay, so real quick, if that happens, those are called your user interface UI elements. So if I come back over here and I go down to display and I go to UI elements right here, now it lists all these. Now if you want to save yourself time, see the little dotted line here, Maya does this? If you click that little dotted line, and it's going to bring up all the elements for you. So now I could come over here, I could click status line. Status line is a line down here on the very bottom of the screen that tells me if it's saving. It tells me where it's saving as. It tells me the percentage and how it's saving. Most programs, even Photoshop has that, okay? Right here, these are the big ones for us. The shelf. If I click shelf right there, that's the shelf where I have that little polygon tab, okay? Sometimes you can bring up the help line. The help line is another line down here on the bottom that tells me if there's a problem. That Maya will tell me this isn't saving right, or you can't do that command. There's an issue there. Okay, and then also right here you have tool settings, attribute editor, and so on. Okay, so if I bring that up, it brings up the toolbox. You don't have to worry about that right now. Also right here, this is another way to bring up the layer editor and channel box. So if I click channel box, layer editor down here, it brings up that little box on the right hand side. The other way I showed you to bring up that box is if you come up here and you click in the upper right hand corner, you bring it up this way. Now the importance of bringing up that box is that if we create a shape, so I'm going to create a cylinder right now, okay? If we create a shape and I click on that box, if I touch the input selection for that, I could come over and touch, for example, subdivisions and height right now. If I highlight that just by touching it and come over middle mouse button drag left to right, you see what I'm doing? I'm automatically adding insertion lines, okay, inside my height relationship for that object, okay? I'll come back to that in a minute, okay? So that's with anything. Watch, if I create a sphere real quick, and I have a sphere up here that's on, let me raise my sphere up a little bit. If I touch polysphere here and come down to subdivisions of height, and then drag across middle mouse button, I can make that what I call really green. There's 50 selections there. I can go the other way, and I can make it only 3 selections, which changes the whole object itself. Okay, so that's our base selection. I toggle back and forth on my screen to look at the views from 4 to 5. 4 gives me the see-through wireframe mode. 5 gives me the shaded mode. Where is that useful? Well, if I want to come through here and I want to switch to vertices and select vertices, going back to 4 is going to allow me to see through the object. So now to select vertices, a little bit of a review. We talked about that last week. One basic way we can do that is we can come over here to the upper, you have these 3 icons here. One is for selecting by grouping. The middle one is independent selection of the object. The other one is the vertices. If I click this right now, I have vertices right here. Okay. Another way that I prefer is I right click on the object with the far right mouse button. Guess that would be right click, right? And I come over here and I can just go to vertices and it changes it, or I can go here and go back to object mode. And I find that to be really useful. I use that quite often, where I'll just be working and I slide in there and I sort of just right click on the object and change very quickly. So another option I showed you as well was the F8 button. By pressing F8, you can toggle inside and outside of grabbing the vertices selection. So you see this? I'm pressing F8 right now. And every time I press that, it takes me back to the vertices and then it takes me back here. Now this happened to a student where they came over here and they had this. And when they pressed F8, let's go to shaded mode, they're like, and then they press, hold on. And when they pressed F8, they had, what did they have? Object, this is what they had. They're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Look, I have this, it's not working, Instructor Phil. I have that. Well, that's just a selection mode that does that. That can be really useful for texturing, where we want to select faces real quick. We can select something. All we do is we right click on that. That was vertice face. We want to go back to vertices, just right above it, and then there it is. Okay. Some of you did this last week. Ah, what happened? You hit the space bar. The space bar brings up 4 views that you have. If I hold my cursor, someone said, "What's my cursor?" This is your cursor. It's a little your little mouse. If I hold that over a particular view and then press space bar, it'll bring me to that point of view. And if I come back again and hold it over the other window, it'll bring me back. So that's pressing the space bar. Really user friendly. Now, when you're in this 4 view, I like to call this the orthographic views. Okay, orthographics, for any of you that don't know what that means, this is when we're looking at particular views that don't have any depth happening. Top view, side view, front view. And if you look here, right here, in this little green letters, it's a little hard to see, but right here on every window it tells you what view it is. That's top view, that's front view, there's side view right there. That's really important for me because a little bit later on when I'm modeling, like for example, let's say I wanted to select all of these vertices right here. Okay, after I do that, I could come back to another view, like you see my front view right here. My front view allows me to see the object and see exactly the vertices I want. In fact, what's pretty interesting is that this gives me my object completely lined up. So if I want to select the whole midsection right here, I just drag over it. Now watch what happens when I go back to my perspective view. They're completely selected. You see that? So using the front view or side view, either or any of the orthographic views can be a very beneficial way for me to select objects. In perspective mode, I could do this. This happens quite often to students. They go, okay, I'm going to select that area right there, and I'm going to scale it in. And what they didn't realize is they missed the back. You see that? I did that on purpose. And that's pretty common where you're looking at it from one point of view. And so from this point of view, it looks like I have all the vertices selected, doesn't it? But I don't. So when I'm working and I go to scale, that's why a nice customary habit is whenever you select something in Maya and you go to change it, just do a quick spin, make sure you have it. Or if you don't do the quick spin, go to 4 and look through. So a benefit for me would be right now to go back to one of my orthographic views and select something very quickly. Okay, so watch. Let's say I want to deselect something. How do I deselect? We covered that real quick too. Okay, oops. Didn't mean to do that. Uh-oh. Here, I'll cover that. Or you might do what I just did. Look, I created 2 windows that say top. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Come back up here under panels. Go to perspective, perspective. And that'll put that view back in perspective. Okay? Every one of these windows, in fact, everything you open in Maya always has its own little menu bar above it for control. So right here, look, every one of these windows says view, shading, lighting, show, render, panels. If I click panels, I can come down here and go to just a perspective. Now, some people don't like this 4 window way. If you want to do it this way, I could go to panels, perspective, panels, orthographic, and go to side and look at what it does. It takes me right to my side view. So now I could come in here, and if I just drag over, it selected that whole entire side view of vertices right there. Then I can come back here, say perspective, and see, look, I go back to perspective, and there it is. It's all selected. So you have these different views as a benefit for you. Now, some of you might not use these views right now, but when you're in a large scene and you're making like the interior of a restaurant or a location, you're going to be moving stuff around all the time, and that's where the top view comes in handy. That's where the side view comes in handy. And actually, something that we'll do a little bit later is in Maya, you can import a drawing. And then you can work from a side view and you model it at a side view. And then you work from a front view and you model it. And that's how you create or work from someone's drawings and you create an in-depth model. Okay? I don't like to teach you guys to become drawing dependent, because I worked with artists that are drawing dependent. Drawings are great to work from, but I want you to use your own creativity and think of this more as like Legos, where you can start building your own stuff and you're not relying on a drawing to use. Okay, so we'll get to that a little bit later. So let's just see what else there is to cover right now and talk about. Now, I don't know if this happened with anybody, but watch this. Here, when I create, did you notice when I create a primitive, it asks me to draw on the grid, and then it asks me to draw up, right? Okay, watch this. If I come over here, and if I go down to, you know what, let me find where this is. I haven't done it for a little bit here. So watch this. If I go over to create, and I go to Polygon Primitives, that's what we're creating. And if I come down here, do you see that little switch right there, interactive creation? That's what mode I'm in right now, is interactive creation. So if I take off interactive creation, and now I go grab a cube, it just creates a cube for me in the middle of the grid right there. That's how Maya used to be. It used to just, it creates it and boom, it's there. So watch. If I don't want that, I want a torus, a donut. There it is. It's created. See what I'm... So that's another option that you could use for creation. If you like to use the creation where you get to scale it a little bit, you can come back over here and we go to create, we go to Polygon Primitives, and we come down here and we turn on interactive creation. Because now if I create something, it's going to say drag on the base and then drag up for height. So now this gives me a little bit more control and allows me to create objects very quickly that might fit a particular size or relationship that I want. Okay? All right, and then most important, the last thing that I want to talk about, I covered this in some of the demos that I talked about, is it just save, file, save scene as. Any work I'm doing right now would be lost. I'm just gonna, I could create a folder on my desktop or on your drive and save it, okay? Just when you're working on larger files, it's a good idea not to work off your thumb drive sometimes. A lot of artists will bring their work and drop it on the desktop, save it on the desktop, and then when you're done saving, then you take that and then you drop it back into your folder, okay? So right now I could say go to desktop right here and then call this chair. This is why, by the way, Kylie, my desktop gets so dirty. It's because I'm always saving projects in all my classes, and I look and I got all these projects and I get scared to delete something because then I go back to do another demo and I didn't back it up. And anyway, so look, I'm going to save this as desktop. I'm going to call this chair. Now I talked about this. 01. I want you to save inversions. Why? It's quite common in Maya that if we save, okay, and something goes wrong, and we're on just version 1, we've lost everything. If by the end of today I save and I'm on chair 06, and I go to open 6 and it's corrupt, I can go back to 4 or 5 and I lost 20 minutes of work. That's a huge incentive for me. Okay, so look, real quick, I'm going to go to my messy desktop here. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to say folder new. Okay, I'm going to call this chair model. All right, and then I'm going to come over. I'm going to grab chair 1. I'm going to drop it inside there so I know where it is. And I'm ready to go whenever I want to save. Okay. Any other questions from anybody about sort of the basics that we've talked about right now? Okay. Let me walk you through a couple more about, we talked about the movement and the scale and the rotation tools. So I want to cover those real quick. So in Maya, once we have something that's been created, this view, by the way, is called our Opengl view. Okay. And once we look in this particular view, we'll be able to see our objects. Now we talked about rotating, okay, and moving around. If we press Alt and left mouse button, we get that little rotate symbol, and that allows us to rotate inside the picture plane. If I press Alt and middle mouse button and hold the mouse button, that allows me to move something up and down and pull it from side to side. If I press Alt, left mouse button, and middle mouse button at the same time, it allows me to zoom in and out. Or I could just roll the third button on the mouse. The third button is the button that's in the middle of the mouse right here. I bought these mice for a reason because it has that little roller. Once you use a little roller mouse, you'll never go back to an Apple mouse again. Okay, because these little rollers are really great. I use them all the time, especially for going to a page to look at something. You can scroll up and down. They save you a lot of time, and I use it in Maya. I know it looks a little crazy, but you'll get used to doing this like this. You'll get used to moving, zooming in, zooming out. Okay, so let me show you something else that we talked about. We talked about, I showed you F, which was frame all view. Okay, F is if I touch an object and I can barely see it, and if I hit F, it'll frame that object in my view, in my Opengl view. Okay, now something that happens sometimes is you guys will do this. Watch, I'm going to do it on purpose. I can't see anything. Look at me spinning around right now. I am stuck in outer space in Maya. I have no idea. Look, where'd it go? I can't find, and you'll just keep looking around and you can't find it. I'm going to show you how to find your object real easy. In Maya, everything that we create, whether it be a light, a model, anything, a piece of primitive, we have an outliner. To bring up that outliner, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you these couple little hotkeys right here that are always in here. Okay, so watch. Remember how I hit the space bar and I had that? I can also click one of these little hotkeys on the left-hand side here. So look at this. If I hit this one down here, it says 4 view. If I click that, it brings me to 4 views. If I click the one above it, it brings me to 1 view. Also, the one right here, do you see this one, the third one down? It says perspective/outliner. If I click this open right now, it brings open my outliner right here. Anything created inside my location will be listed right here. If I touch cylinder 1, bring my cursor over the main window and hit F, it'll automatically bring me to that object that's been selected in my outliner. Okay? In this particular scene though, I only have one object created. So watch, let me go over here and create a couple different objects right now. Okay, so now I have 4 objects created in my scene. My outliner is my friend right now because I could come over here and I could see what every one of those objects is. In fact, I can label it. And that's something you want to get used to as you're working. Okay, I could come over here, and if I touch this twice, it'll highlight this particular area. And now I could come in here and I could say chair face. Boom. And now it's labeled. This is a real benefit for me because as you're working later on in this class, you could end up, once we start doing your rocket chair, you're going to end up with like 75 pieces. You want to be able to find those pieces, use them, duplicate them, and group them together. Okay? All right, and we'll talk about grouping a little bit later today as I start making my chair here real quick that I covered up on the board here. Okay, so why don't we dive into that right now? I'm going to go ahead, and I don't need any of these, so I'm just going to select them and delete them. And look, to delete, I just touch the object and I hit delete on my keyboard, and the object's gone. Okay, and look at what happened when I deleted it. It disappeared out of my outliner. Okay, these are my core functions that I need that I can use on a regular basis. Now, I like this little button here because look, I can close this by hitting that button. I come back and I open it, and there's my outliner again. However, though, another option is if we come over here under Window and I go down to Outliner, it brings up my outliner separate. You see this? It's a free floating window. If you have dual monitors, I can put it over on another monitor and have my outliner up. Okay, that's another option I have. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Because what will happen is if I put it on the other monitor and I forget it's over there and I go to open up Outliner, you can't really see it. Okay, so that's why I like using this little hotkey there. Now look, down below that hotkey, there's another one here. That's for animating. You don't have to worry about that. We're not going to do any animation in here. Okay, and then there's another one down here that has like the hypershade materials. We'll get to that later in the class. Okay. For right now, this is the key button that we're going to use here for making our chairs. Okay? All right, so that's 20 minutes on the review. Okay? Let's go in. I'm going to start making my chair right now. Okay, I'm going to make the chair wheel. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to drag, pull this up. Okay, that's part of my chair wheel right there. However, it's lying flat on the ground. I want to be able to rotate it. So we talked about how to rotate something real quick. We have the move tools. Okay, which were Q, W, E, R. Q was to select, W allowed us to move, E gave us rotation arrows, and R gave us scale arrows. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to click E. I'm going to make sure my channel box is open right now. As I come over here and I grab the blue line for rotating and I go to rotate this, I want to get it exactly on angle. It's really hard to get it exactly to 90. You will probably rotate it like this, and then you'll need to come over here and type in 90. And we talked about what happens when you don't type in 90. If you don't type in 90, and if I have something that's at 87.9 degrees, and I go to move that, it's slowly going to move at a different angle. It's not going to move what we call flush. What's great about this is I can drag it anywhere in the scene or the location right now, and it's going to stay flush. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my chair wheels really quick. Okay. All right. Another way to zoom too is this. If you hold Alt and you drag, Alt and Control on your keyboard, and draw a little box over something, it brings you right to it. So hold Alt and Control, and then go like this. And they'll zoom you in real quick. That's another option you have for doing a quick zoom. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take this wheel right here. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move it over a little bit. That looks like 2 wheels, right? And now I'm going to make the center part real quick that holds those wheels together. So I'm going to duplicate one of those spheres. I'm going to get it right in the middle here, and I'm just going to hit Scale and scale it down from the center. Hit the other scale arrow and stretch it out a little bit more like this so it goes inside. There it is. Now that looks like a little center part that connects that. Okay. All right. Now I want to make some type of base or element that the wheel connects to that holds it to the arm leg. Okay, or the chair leg I should say. So to do that really quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create another cylinder. I'm going to do this right behind it, right here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that. I'm going to put it in position right about here. Now you can see that's maybe a little too thick because it's hitting the walls of the wheel, right, for the chair. So then I can come back to scale by pressing R, and go from the middle, and I can scale down. See, and I can get it to fit in there sort of perfectly like that. And if I have to, I can even move one of my chair leg, the wheels over a teeny bit, just to create a little bit more space in there, like so. Okay, there. Now I have the base of my chair. Okay. Let's say real quick, I want to move the vertices up a little bit. I right-click on my object, I go to Vertices, I select the upper row of vertices, I grab the arrow and I move it up. Okay. After I did that, I want to go back to object mode. A couple ways I can do that. I can hit F8. Actually, F8 wasn't, there it goes. Okay. Or I can right-click on it, which I prefer, and I go back to object mode. Now I'm going to duplicate that shape real quick. And I'm going to make the little part that inserts into the leg right there. Do you see that? So that's basically my chair wheel. Okay. So watch. Now I'm going to select this, all of these, and I'm going to group them together so I can move them around easier. That's really easy. I just drag over all of them right now and select them. And look at what happens when I drag over all of them. They get highlighted inside my outliner. See, all those are highlighted. I can hit Control G, or I can come over to Edit. And if I go down here, there's Group at the bottom. These are some of the hotkeys you start to use. So if I hit Control G and group it, whenever I group an object or do a Boolean to an object, which I'll do in a minute, okay, it centers the pivot away from the object back to the center of the world. To get the pivot back, so this is important because I don't want to be moving this object around with the pivot not being there, right? To get the pivot back to the object, I go under Modify and I go down to Center Pivot. Okay, and there it is. Now I have a chair wheel. I can even come up here in my outliner. Look at how it listed it. It created the group. And if I come over here and I touch that plus symbol on the outliner right here, it'll open up and look at what I have. I have all of the individual parts that have been created inside my chair right there. Okay? Inside the wheel. And what's really cool is now I could select that grouping and I can move it around. I could even duplicate that grouping if I like. Okay? All right, now let's make the leg part of the chair that's going to connect to the round base. Okay? So that's really easy. Quinn, you got a question?
Yeah, is there an advantage of making the group instead of doing like the Boolean thing? Or?
Well, the Boolean thing is to take delete a section out of another selection, or to grab, it's making parts. No, yeah, that's a little different. We don't want to use that. That might create, I don't use union that much. Okay, and there's a reason for that. We'll talk a little bit later about that when we get more into coloring an object or texturing it. Yes, sir. Tito.
I'm looking at the top of the cylinder thing for the wheel.
Yeah?
How did you make it like one part thick and one part thin?
I just, so look, to touch this right now, like if I'm in this mode, remember your 3 selection modes here, by the way? That won't allow me to touch that. So if I come over in independent, now I can touch it. I just took that and I duplicated it. And I just scaled it down. The scale tool is your friend. I'll show you a little bit later how we use that scale tool to make and create all kinds of cool shapes. I basically touched that shape right there and I went like this. I duplicated it. I raised it up a little bit. I hit the scale button and then I touched the middle of the scale and I scaled it down like so. And then I just dropped it inside itself like that. See, I just grabbed it and dropped it inside. That's okay to do that. And there it is. I have that little chair detail. Okay? Yes, Kylie?
Could you repeat about the grouping to make it one object?
Yeah. So it's, and now there's a difference though. Is a grouping, I'm temporarily making it an object. They're still independent though, because there's another way in Maya where you combine something and you tell Maya, hey, it's all one piece now. So there's a difference there. So to group it, this is what I'm going to do. Okay? I'm going to ungroup it right now. Look, I can select multiple parts that I want. When I have those selected, the hotkey is Control G, which is the easiest way to remember. If I hit Control G on my keyboard, it now groups it together. But whenever it groups it, it's going to center the pivot. The pivot is now away from the object. To get the pivot back there, I need to come under Modify and tell it to center pivot. Boom, and then there's my pivot. So I've created that little part right there. Okay? All right, and then the same thing, let's say I'm working on this. Now here's something that some students will come back and they'll be like, oh, look, it's not grouped. It's just objects. It is grouped. I have to check it in my outliner. If I look right now, I'm selecting the independent objects of that group. Why? Because I'm in the independent mode right here. Right? I'm in the independent selection mode, which is that middle mode. If I come back over here and go to the hierarchy selection and then touch it, it keeps the whole object group together. Okay? All right, so I'll keep going here. Let me create the leg part of that chair real quick. To do that, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to stretch my cube out like about there. And it asks me to bring in the height. So I'm going to bring in the height there. Okay? Now, when you look at the leg of a chair, it's not perfect like this. So if I come over here and I stick this right here, so I got to get it centered right now. So I'm going to bring this over, get it right about there. I'm going to raise this up a little bit. Look to make sure it's inserting. Is that in the middle right there? No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and just sort of eyeball it and get it matched up so it's in the middle like that. Okay? Now that I've done that, I'm going to create the base of the chair leg. Chair legs are not perfect cubes like that. So I'm going to modify the vertices. I'm going to right click on the object, tell it to go to vertice. Okay? Now it didn't go to vertice because I'm not in my selection mode. I need to go to independent selection here, which is Vertices Selection. Now it's in vertices. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to drag over those vertices right there. I'm going to pull them back, drop them down a little bit like that. And I'm going to come over here to this part. And I'm going to grab these and I'm going to pull these up a little bit like that. Okay? See how I did that? Took a base cube, modified a couple of the vertices real quick, and this is what I ended up with. That's still a cube shape. I can move vertices around. What you don't want to do is this. Don't grab one of the vertices and move one of the vertices, or else you totally mess up the chair. Unless you're going from some type of stealthy looking chair or something weird. Okay? I can grab. The other thing I don't want to do is I want to leave this back wall what I call flush. Remember I mentioned that term. That's a construction term. Flush means basically 90 degrees. That something could butt up against another object and be perfectly flush with that object. So when we build houses, we make sure the framing is always at 90 degrees, because then anything we attach to it will be flush to the object and will match. Okay? Now I can change the front of this chair, this little leg here. I can modify that. I can make it bigger. Could be a goofy looking chair. I can make it like that. That's fine. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to mess with the back part here. Why? Because I'm going to make that center right here in the middle that I drew up here on the wall. Okay, on the board up here. I'm going to call it chalkboard, but it's dry erase board. Okay. All right, so real quick, before I even continue, what am I going to do? Save. File. Save scene as. I put it on my desktop, and I create a new folder for it, and I call it the chair model. I'm going to click that, and save chair 01, hit save as. Yes. Now I've saved it. It's there. I'll do 20 minutes of work, and I'm going to save as chair 02. Okay? So if anything happens, I have that file as a backup. All right, so now, real quick, I'm going to go to make that center right here. Okay? So we talked about that real quick. I could make a cheesy center where I could just go like this. Okay? That came out a little huge, so I can scale it down a little bit. Now what I need to do is when I look at that right now, is that centered to the chair leg? No. So what I can do is, remember, I could find right angles on objects, right? So when I'm looking at this shape right here, you see how there's a line going across here? And I could also find the 90-degree line. If I take that and I move that object, you just got to eyeball it, and you get it just about centered. And I could look at this and measure. That looks like it's about centered, but more importantly, I can take a look at how this edge right here is just a little bit past that line, and it's the same thing on that edge. See that? So I know that's pretty good position. Okay. However, that's pretty basic right there, right? Let's say we wanted to make something a little bit more interesting that could have the lever. We talked about dividing the sections in there. So what I'm going to do right now is with that cylinder selected, I'm going to come over here to the input selection under poly cylinder. I'm going to touch down to height right here, and I'm going to add in another 6 or 7 subdivisions right there. Do you see how I did that? Okay. And now here comes the fun part, is moving and scaling those around to make a different shape. Okay, so watch me right here. Okay, everyone look up real quick. I know some of you guys, you start having fun, you start modeling and making stuff. This is really cool right here because now I added in all these intersection lines, okay? All right, the subdivisions in height. And now I could come over here and I could start moving these and I can make that object right here on the board in the lower right-hand corner. Okay, so to make that, watch. Now I'm going to go to Vertices Selection, and here's the fun part of Maya. It's getting to move these vertices around. So watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to scale these up right now. I'm going to come down here and watch. I'm going to select this bottom row right here, look through with 4. Okay, and I'm just going to scale them down just a teeny bit by going to the scale tool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them up so I create a little bit of a nice edge on there. You see how I created that little edge? Okay, but now I can select all of those vertices, and then I'm going to move them down a little bit like that. So it's right under the chair, or right under the arm, I should say. Then I'm going to come back up here. I look at my drawing. The top part had a little bit of a beveled edge. I'm going to select all these. I'm going to scale them in a little bit, and then I'm going to move them downward like that. Now I have, go back to scale, and now I have a little bit of a beveled edge. Please make sure you scale with the center. The yellow dot allows me to scale from the center. If I scale like this, it's going to stretch it and contort it outward, right? Scale from the center. So now I have my little beveled edge, right? Look at my drawing up there. So I go beveled edge, I drop down, but then this is going to converge in. And it's not only converging once, but it converges in twice, right here, 1, 2. So it would be in my best interest now. This is where when I draw a shape out and I add up my little lines, I can come back and check on my piece of paper. It's just a little rough drawing, but now I know I need to select 2 full sets. So we talked about orthographic view. What are my options to select right now? I could go to 4 and drag and drop and select them like that. Or I could do this. Okay, well now I'm not getting my 4 view mode. Why? Because I told Maya I wanted the outliner mode. So I come up here and click this little button right here. That brings me my 4 views. I could come over here, go to front view. There's my object. Let's say I didn't have them selected. I can just drag and drop over them. Hit spacebar, go back to perspective view, and now I look and they're all perfectly selected in there. Okay. Once they're selected, here comes the magic. Ready? Dun, dun, dun. See, I just scaled them inwards. Okay. So I can scale them in like that. And then watch. Now I can move them. Now I can move it up a little bit. That looks somewhat similar to my little piece I had up there, right? Now I want to move the lower section down a little bit more. Okay. So what I can do to do that is I need to deselect the top vertices. So to deselect, you hold down Control and you drag over a particular area and it deselects the vertices. You can also hit Shift, but what sucks about Shift is if I accidentally touch another vertice, it'll select those other vertices. Control completely deselects everything. So now I hold Control, I drag over it, and look at what happened. Boom. I have all those deselected. Now I can drag this, see? And I can bring it down to where it sort of pinches right there. Do you see how I did that? So now I have that shape I was drawing on the board right there. Okay. So I showed you how I just created that now. Now watch. I like to select off of my object sometimes so I can take a look at the object and see what it looks like. So to do that, I just come over here and I just touch off the... Now you'll notice it won't, when I touch off the screen, it doesn't allow me to do that. So sometimes what I do, I don't like looking at that grid all the time. Sometimes I create a big fat cube like this, and then I raise it up a little bit, just a little bit over the grid. So it acts as like a floor. That way, when I'm modeling, I can touch off and touch back, and look, see, I have that cool little part right now that I just created right there. Okay, so now we need to take this other side right here and we need to group that together, and then we're going to duplicate that. We're not going to remodel that same base and chair every time. No way, that'd be too much work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to select these like this. Okay, now be careful you don't accidentally select the ground plane with it. I put a ground plane in there because I hate looking at the grid all the time, and that way I get a good idea on how my chair rests on the ground. Okay, so I'm going to hold shift while I'm selecting, deselect the ground plane. I have everything selected right here. I can hit Control G, then I have to center the pivot, right? Come back, modify, center pivot. There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to, it's not quite all the way in there, so I'm going to stick it in a little bit more there. So now it's inside that center. So now I need to duplicate that. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. I just duplicated that whole piece. I'm going to move it over here, and now I need to spin it. Okay, so I'm going to show you another way besides spinning that's really cool about the scale tool too. So here's an option, is I could come down to rotate, grab the green arrow, hold shift, and I'm going to spin it all the way around. And if I come up here into the rotate option in the channel box, it says it's rotated 173 degrees. I'll type in 180 to be exact, and there it is. It's exactly rotated the way I want, and now I'm just going to position it in right here. See that? And stick it in, and look at that. That's the basics of my chair. Let me move my ground plane over a little bit more so it's a little easier to see. Okay? So look at that. There's the basics of my chair now existing in. Okay? Now I need to make the other legs for my chair real quick. However, let me hit Command Z real quick and go back a couple steps. I want to show you another way you could do that. If you didn't want to rotate it, check this out. I can touch it, I could go to scale, and I can inverse the scale. And then where I did that, I come over here to scale, and see, now it went to a negative, so I type in -1, and there it is. I love the scale tool for that feature, so I can scale something in and out of inside itself, and it's a useful tool. And I can drag that to where it just goes right inside. There it is. Okay. Now I have the other two legs. This is where you need to think about what you're doing sometimes. I could duplicate this right now, drag it over, go to rotate and rotate it and put this at -90, right? And then move it over and get in place, right? But I could also do this. Group, modify, center pivot, and the pivot is now smack dab in the middle. Duplicate, oops, and rotate. Uh-oh, what happened when I rotated there? It got all crooked, right? And it got crooked because when I selected one of these, I had it off a little bit on the angle. There, so now I selected just the yellow, and I get that up to right here. I come over here and I type in 90, and there's my chair base right now. Okay? So I could have selected it by part and done it that way. You know what does that make sense? I could have selected it, or I could have just grouped it, duplicated it, and spun it. So one thing you got to remember about Maya that's really great, anything that's in a that has circumference to it or that's a circle, I can group both sides and just rotate them around, which saves me a lot of time. Watch, I'm going to Command Z that right now. If you didn't want to do that, that's fine. You could have just taken one of them like this. You could duplicate them. You could move them over, bring it back over here a little bit. Watch, and I can rotate it like this. And now I can come in here, put -90. And then I can just move it. But see, it takes a lot more time and effort than if I did it the other way. Now when I get it in here, I need to check the center line. There's the center line, so I could look, there's much more on this side than on that side. So what I need to do is I need to take the chair here and I need to move it over a little bit and get it where it's centered. Look, now it's too much more on that side. See, I'm looking at the lines, comparing them. So now I take this and move it over just a teeny bit. There. Even a little bit more. Yeah, that's pretty centered right there. So and then I'm like, oh, now it's not, it's gone through it. So now I have to grab it, drag it out, and then where it just fits in the side, there's my chair base on that side. See, the other way, I just duplicated it and spun it one time and I was done. It immediately fit in there. So let's say I had that one. Watch, I'm going to duplicate that guy, bring him over here, go to inverse, flip them, go to the negative, -1, and then I'm going to move them and I'm going to slide them right to where those lines go right in the side. There it is. So now what I can do is I can select all of these, hit Control G and group them, go to my outliner, and I can call that chair base. Sorry, my caps was on. And what's great is when I open this now, look at what's in there. When I open chair base, open the plus, group 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all my individual little legs right there, which is great. And then I can open up those groupings and I could go to the independent parts. See, that was a grouping, was just the base there. So now when you think about it, I have one grouping, which was the wheels. So I could label that wheels. Another grouping, which right here was the arm. And then I grouped that whole thing together and it became one of the legs, right? And then I just duplicated that leg. This is where thinking and planning before you model something and thinking about items and groups works. It's to your benefit. So anything that you model, as you start working forward, you need to think about it. Don't think about it as an object with 100 million pieces or 100 different pieces. Think about it as one section of that object. Model that one section, then go to the next section and the next section. And you'll be more successful that way. And it'll be easier. Okay? So right now I have my chair base in there, right? Now I can go ahead and I'm going to pause the recorder in a minute because I'm at 44 minutes. And I want to save it so I don't lose any of this. But I have enough right there for me to start working on. Okay? So let's say now I want to create a center that comes from there and goes up. You know, I could duplicate this and put it up above. So watch, if I select that piece and I duplicate it, and then it doesn't fit right. So what if I scale it down a little bit like this? And then I stick that inside like that. I go back to vertices. I grab the lower vertices. Maybe I move them up a little like that. That's fine. So now I have another little piece that the chair might sit on itself. And again, remember scale? Look, I can go to scale and do this. And I can squash it down. I can stretch it. That's why the scale tool is so convenient. There. And that might be the part that my chair rests on, let's say. Okay, or if I don't want that, maybe I don't need it. Maybe this is, my chair is just going to sit right on top of there. That's totally fine. Okay? So what I'll start to do next is I want to let you guys work for a little bit so I can walk around and answer questions. I'll finish part of this demo tomorrow because I want you to try to make the chair, this is the hard part, is I want you to try to make the base of the chair yourself and think about how you would do that. Okay, and I'll draw a little bit on the board and talk about that right now for you. But this is sometimes I like you guys to get in there and experiment with the program and figure out the direction you're going into. Okay, but look at what I have right now. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. Here's the big thing to remember: File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to come down here to Charo. Then I'm going to select the part of 01 and put 2 and hit Save As. Okay, so now when I come back and I look at that folder right here, I have chair 2 there. See that? I have chair 1 and chair 2. That's huge. Because look at the difference. From when I saved the first time, I doubled the file size. I was at 94 KB, now I'm at 186. Because I duplicated all those chair legs. Okay? So it's important to save your work, have it there, and then that way you're ready to go and just try to save every 20 minutes. That's a good, 20, 30 minutes is a good way to save. And it's a good purpose because if something goes wrong and you open it and it crashes, you've only lost 20 minutes of work, okay? So I'm going to stop the recorder right now, and then I'll come back into this in the next class. But I'm going to show you something really cool on how to bend stuff and how to make like a nice soft cushion. But I want you guys to get in there and try to figure it out yourselves from using some of the wonderful options that you have, okay? All right.